How's it going, everybody? Back again for another episode of Ask the Farmer. Today is Labor Day, and this is the first Labor Day I can remember in, I don't know when, that I actually haven't been laboring on Labor Day. Normally we're in the cornfield or got something to do in the fields, but luckily we got everything we need done, and we're just waiting to go to the field with the combine. So anyway, what I've been working on today is detailing some vehicles. Got my wife's ride here. Been working on getting it polished and cleaned up. We got a ceramic coat we're putting on it. I don't know if y'all watch a YouTube channel called Project Farm, but I've gotten in that channel here quite a bit lately. And anyway, he does a lot of testing of different products that you would use in your shop, your automotive, or farm equipment, or household stuff, tools. I mean, he tests a lot of stuff to find out what's the best and what's worth the money. And one of his videos that he did that I watched, he was testing different ceramic coatings and also comparing them against each other and comparing them to wax. And what he found out is that ceramic coatings is far superior to wax in longevity. And the best one that he tested that lasted the longest of the ceramic coatings was this. It's a hybrid solution ceramic spray coating made by Turtle Wax. So I'm putting it to the test myself. We got Kelly's ride done. Just got to do one final buffing on the haze. Gonna let it cure out while I film this video. And then earlier today, I did the old GMC. I tell you what, that old saying is most definitely not true. You can put lipstick on a pig. It's not a pretty truck. It never will be a pretty truck, but it cleaned up pretty good. But I'm pretty sure with harvest right around the corner, probably not gonna stay that way very long. But anyway, it feels good to clean it up. So anyway, let me get my phone, get the questions, and we'll see if we can get another 5 questions or so answered in this video. All right, the first question today is from Daniel Harpole. He says, I'm from Jonesboro, Arkansas, growing conventional corn. Have you done the same? Mostly wondering about what insecticide in corn and beans. Might even touch on chicken litter. Daniel, we haven't grown conventional corn in a long time. The first genetically modified trait that came out was the BT gene there, in late 90s. We started growing BT gene real quick because worm feeding on the kernels of the corn could definitely be a problem and reduce yields in certain years, and we wanted to eliminate that. Also, when the worms feed on the kernels, it damages the kernels. It makes it that much easier for aflatoxin to set in, and aflatoxin can be a real problem in some years on corn, especially drought years, so we want to mitigate that. However, we did resist going to Roundup Ready corn for as long as we possibly could. We were using Roundup Ready in soybeans and cotton, but in corn we were really resisting going to it because the chemical options in controlling weeds was better in corn at that time, and we didn't really see a need for Roundup, and we wanted to, you know, slow down how fast things would get resistant to Roundup. And ultimately, you know, what we do on our farm really doesn't make that much of a difference nationwide, but you know, we want to do our part. But it got to where it was so dang difficult to find good varieties without the Roundup Ready gene that ultimately we were forced to go to Roundup Ready corn. We could go to conventional corn and we could save quite a bit on seed costs. However, the breeding on genetics just hasn't been there like it is on your transgenic varieties, and the yield gap is just too great in my opinion. You know, it's very unlikely that we would save enough on seed to be able to cover the cost of the yield penalty we would see by not using transgenic corn. So, no, there's people out there that grow conventional corn and they do well with it. I just don't think it's a good fit for our operation, but I have looked at it. As far as insecticide on corn and beans, we don't use any insecticide on corn. We got the BT trait. Worms is really the only thing we're worried about, so we don't have to use an insecticide. Occasionally you might have some Japanese beetles come in, maybe some stink bugs that could cause a little bit of damage, but generally it's not at threshold levels. I know there's a lot of farmers out there that will automatically include an insecticide when they spray a fungicide, and to me, that's not a good practice unless you have the insects out there that you need to kill. Just putting something in there because it's cheap and you're going across the acres, I don't think is a good practice, and it can actually result in flaring up pests by killing off a lot of the beneficials that are keeping pests low. In soybeans, we only spray an insecticide when it's necessary, and I'd say it's really only necessary maybe about half the years. It was necessary last year, it was necessary this year. We did spray an insecticide. In that case, we sprayed lambdicide. It's a pyrethroid, and it's a cheap pyrethroid, but it kills what we need to. But we only spray when insect levels have met threshold levels in our field according to integrated pest management. We don't automatically include an insecticide in with another spray just because we're going across the acres. Typically, when you're talking about insects in soybeans, the insect populations won't build up to a threshold level until later on in the season, generally after we've applied a fungicide. And in that case, we'll go back and make a separate insecticide application, but we will not include an insecticide with our fungicide just because we're going across the acres. I just don't think it's good practice, and we won't do it. As far as chicken litter, we apply chicken litter on about probably 85% of our acres. There's a few farms that the landlord actually lives on or is surrounded by subdivisions, and either that particular landlord doesn't want to deal with the smell, or they don't want to listen to complaints from the people living in the subdivision about the smell. But about 85% of our acres we can put chicken litter on, and we apply 1.5 tons each year to those acres, and that gives me about 67 units of phosphorus and potassium. It gives us some nitrogen also, but we typically don't figure on that because it can be released at weird times, and especially in corn, we can't absolutely count on that nitrogen being there when we need it. We typically try to apply our chicken litter late winter, early spring. That way it's applied to our cover crops. It's a job that's already done and out of the way, and that chicken litter can go ahead and start decomposing and releasing the nutrients. And then you got the cover crops out there that can take up those nutrients, so those nutrients don't get lost to the environment either through runoff or leaching. And then when we kill the cover crop, those nutrients are there and ready for the cash crop. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Next question is from Eric West, and he asks, do I do an equipment rotation? If so, what's next and what are you looking at? Eric, no, we really don't do an equipment rotation to where we say we're going to keep a piece of equipment 3 years and then we're going to trade it off, whether we need a new piece of equipment or not. We don't do that. That's not the way we want to do business. When we buy a piece of equipment, we have every intention of keeping that equipment as long as possible until it flat wears out. We think that keeps our cost the lowest in the long run because farm equipment is terribly, terribly expensive, and it depreciates. So we like to keep a piece of equipment through its depreciation period and then keep it a few years after when it's not depreciation, just to get our full value out of it. That means we have more cost in repair and maintenance, but overall we think that that's good practice. When we talk about keeping equipment, we're liable to keep a tractor 10 plus years. Keep a combine, 5, 6, 7 years. Bought our first combine in 2002, bought our next one in mid-season 2011. That one lasted us until 2017 when we got the one we got now, and I have no intentions of getting rid of it anytime soon. So you can see with the accident last year, I fought like heck to be able to keep that machine on the farm because we thought it was a really, really good machine. We just this last year we traded sprayers. We go through sprayers probably more than anything else because they get the most hours put on them, and because we're using a sprayer all year long. This year, instead of equipment, because all of our equipment is in good shape, have no need of replacing anything at this point. We're doing some upgrades to our grain bin system, getting that loadout tank put up, and a couple other things, because we spent quite a bit of money last year on equipment with new corn head and the new sprayer and new header trailer. So as far as what's next on our list that's probably going to be replaced next, and it's probably the cotton picker. It's a 2003 model. It's got quite a few hours on there, still in really good shape. But if you watched our fall harvest last year, cotton picker caught on fire, and that's a very real risk. it can catch on fire again this fall and actually burn to the ground, and then it would have to be replaced. Problem is that, you know, our picker is a basket picker, and John Deere hadn't made a basket picker in probably 10 years at least. You know, they've gone to the round bale style picker. I think Case IH still makes a basket picker, but they sell like 4 or 5 a year. You know, not many people want a Case IH picker. It's just, in my opinion, it's not as good a design as a John Deere. And the problem with the John Deere picker is the baler pickers are so outrageously expensive. I mean, new ones, last I checked, new ones listed for about $1 million. With discounts and stuff, you could get them a little bit cheaper. But even used ones, I mean, you know, used only 2 or 3 years, you know, they're still going at $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 range. I have seen some older ones, you know, go for around $250,000. But the problem with those is there's probably a good chance you're going to then spend another $50,000 to $75,000 in the heads getting it all up to snuff. So when you don't talk about growing, you know, around 500 acres of cotton a year, I mean, $250,000 to $325,000 to get an older machine and get it rebuilt. That's a tough pill to swallow for one piece of equipment just to get your crop out. But you only use a few weeks out of the year. So I don't know what the future in cotton holds for us. You know, once I lose this machine, either lose it through fire or accident, or it just gets so old that it really can't be repaired anymore, I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, there's really not great options out there for smaller cotton farmers like myself. I mean, you hear 500 acres, you might not think that's a small farmer, but I mean, in truth, it is. Some farmers have told me that in order to justify a new cotton picker, you need to run a minimum of 2,000 acres through that picker each year to be able to justify the cost. Well, we don't even grow 2,000 acres total. If we put every acre we farm in the cotton, it still wouldn't equal 2,000 acres. And even if we did that, then all my eggs are on one basket. Our risk management is not as good. You know, really puts us at a potential severe liability. So we're definitely not going to go that route. So I know I want to keep growing cotton, but ultimately I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep growing cotton. The industry might actually force me out, and I mean, that's sad because, you know, we've been growing cotton for 138 years, and to have it end just because, you know, of equipment, just because of the cost of the equipment, I mean, that's pretty sad. But that's the reality of it. So I don't know. If I keep on making YouTubes and you keep on watching, I guess we'll find out one day. All right, that's all the questions for that were asked during episode 1. Let's see what we got on episode 2 questions. All right, next question is from David McElwain. He asks, have I ever considered using dicamba herbicide? David, no. I'm not a fan of dicamba, and I'm not a fan of its cousin, 2,4-D. For those of y'all that not familiar with what I'm talking about, genetically modified crops have come a long ways. They've introduced different modes of actions of chemicals that our crops are now resistant to, and the last 2 that have been introduced have been to make our crops resistant to dicamba and 2,4-D. Those are both herbicides that are been around for a long time, and typically those are herbicides that we use early in the year when it's cooler in front of our crop to kill winter weeds. But because of the lack of chemistries that will kill these resistant weeds that we have, you know, the companies have introduced genes to protect our crops against those chemicals, thus allowing us to use them in season. And for one thing, both 2,4-D and dicamba, they're very similar. It's 2 different chemicals, but the way they work is almost identical. And you know, you got crops that are resistant to 2,4-D, which are called enlist crops, and then you got crops that are resistant to dicamba, which are called extend crops, and they were both introduced at the same time. The problem with those chemicals is they work fine in cooler weather, but when you get into the temperatures we see during the summer, the hotter weather, it doesn't matter if you apply that chemical perfectly and don't physically drift it as you're spraying onto other people's crops. After you've applied it, might be a day later, might be 2 days later, might be 3 days later, those chemicals can volatilize after they've been applied during hot weather. That means that the chemical actually turns into a gas, gets back up in the air, and then can be carried by air currents wherever onto your neighbor's property. And these chemical companies made what they called low volatility versions of these chemicals, and they are lower volatility, but that doesn't mean no volatility. So, in university tests have proven that dicamba can volatilize in the summer and can be moved off target by air currents. Now, the chemical company is saying, well, you know, it's operator error, it's applicator error why we're getting drift from these chemicals. But universities have proven that that's not the case. In some cases, it is operator error. You're getting physical drift. They're not applying in the right conditions. But in a lot of cases, it's volatility. And you know, I'm not going to spray it for several reasons. One, I can't control if the chemical volatilizes or not. I can apply it perfectly, put it right where it needs to be, but then 48 hours later, it can volatilize and move somewhere else. I can't control that. And yeah, I might kill my weeds, but I could also damage my neighbor's crop. I could also damage my neighbor's garden, their tomato plants, or their grapevines. Or I might damage another farmer's soybeans out there. And that's not liability that I want, and there's nothing I can do to control it. Another reason we don't consider using it is, well, those chemicals, they worked marginally well when they were first introduced. Well, now we've developed resistance to those chemicals too, so they really don't work that well anymore. They kill other weeds, but our target weed, pigweed, they just don't do very good on. I think it's still working in other parts of the country, but right here in West Tennessee, it's just not working anymore. So definitely don't want to expose myself to liability and still not have the chemical do its job. You know, you're getting a double whammy there. So I said, we don't even buy the stuff, not even to spray around the shop, because I don't want any records of us actually having bought any. That way nobody can accuse me of having damaged their crops, their garden, you know, their shrubs, trees, or whatever. I'm not a fan of dicamba. Now the Enlist, the 2,4-D side, I don't believe it volatilizes. I've actually used it. I don't use it that much, but I have used it, and I sprayed it right next to sensitive crops of my own, and have not noticed any kind of adverse effects whatsoever. I think the companies did a really good job of really minimizing the volatility of 2,4-D. Dicamba, though, they didn't do so good, and for that simple fact, I will not spray it. I won't even consider spraying it. So, anyway, hope that answers your question. Next question is from Ricky Penhouse. What is a number for yield as a guess for cotton this year? Well, Ricky, this is what I think like my 16th, 17th cotton crop I put in, and I've had a number in my mind every single year before we take the cotton picker to the field. And every single year, I've been wrong. There's no figuring out cotton on what it's going to yield. It's going to surprise you one way or the other, either good or bad. And a lot of times it's disappointed me, because in the past I've been overly optimistic on the cotton crop, and it hasn't met my expectations. That doesn't mean that it did bad. It just means that my expectations were so high that it didn't meet them. This year's going to be the opposite. I'm really pessimistic. I'm really down on our cotton crop. You know, just if you've been watching us all year long, you know, just from the get-go, cotton has had a real rough go of it. And just really hadn't had the weather to play a lot of catch-up, and ultimately I just think we're going to run out of calendar days to mature it out. Right now the cotton crop's got a lot of fruit on it. I just don't think we're going to have enough heat units to be able to mature it out before the weather turns cold, unfortunately. I could be wrong. You know, if we have a really hot September, you know, cotton can come a long ways, and it might surprise me. But you know, right now it's, I think, 84 degrees, low humidity. You know, I'm down here in the shop, no sweat on my shirt or anything. You know, the first part of September, and it's really forecast to stay this way all week long. So, really not looking good on getting a hot September. So, but if I had to put a number on it, I said a few weeks ago, I told my cotton scout, if someone would pay me 850 pounds an acre for my cotton crop right now, I'd sell it in a heartbeat. And well, I still stand by that. I think probably that I think we'll be doing good to be in that 850 to 900 pound range. My Cotton Scout thinks I'm low on that. He's thinking between 900 and 1,000, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. If we get enough heat units, we have a warm September, warm October. I mean, it could potentially go over 1,000 pounds an acre, but I want to keep my expectations low, and hopefully I'm not disappointed on them. So I'm gonna say 850 to 900 is what I'm gonna say. All right, last question today is from M&J Farms, and he asks, my question is, how do you pick up more acres? Do people find you? In my area, it seems like the landowners don't live around here and have their farm in a generic incorporated name that can make it difficult to locate the owner. M&J, yeah, we've definitely got some like that. We've definitely got some absentee landlords who perhaps grew up on the farm, and then when their parents passed away, handed it out to them, but by that time they'd moved off to a different city following their career or whatever. We're seeing a lot of that. But to answer your question, I don't actively pursue ground that is already being worked by somebody. I just won't do it. I don't want to be that person. I don't want to do business that way. I know there's been a lot of farmers out there that have made their operations real big by doing that. But that's not the way I'm going to do business. I'm not going to try and poach somebody else's ground out from under them. Even if I think I can do a better job, I'm just not going to be that kind of neighbor. So typically I pick up ground by people approaching me, typically by word of mouth. Somebody knows me, recommended me. Maybe one of my landlords recommended me to somebody, and I'll pick up ground that way. The only time I will actively pursue ground is if the farmer who was working it was retired. It's like last year, a 200-acre farm, the farm right next to some farms I worked, the farmer retired, and I contacted the landowner on that and had to sell myself. I came up with a detailed, it was between me and another guy, and I came up with a detailed plan on his farm, the crops I were going to plant, the years I was going to plant them, what his expected income could be based on certain yields and certain prices. I gave him estimates on what I thought his ground should be able to make because I was farming land right next to it, so the soil type was similar. And showed him the different figures at different lease levels on what his income and what his expenses could be. And he was really impressed by the amount of detail that I went into, and that gave me a leg up on the other guy who was bidding on it, because I was able to give the landlord very detailed information on how his farm was going to go and what he could expect. Now, I'm not going to hit those numbers on the dot of what I projected them, because I don't know what it's going to yield. I don't know what the price is going to be. But I would say that based upon what I told him the last 2 years, I have exceeded those expectations because we've had good growing years and I planted the right crops on this farm. 2 years ago, another 2 farms came up through the farmer retiring, and I did the same thing. I prepared detailed packets on each piece of land, gave it to the landlord, sat down with them, and explained what my vision for their farm was. And they were really impressed. Now I'm typically not going to outbid somebody, especially on cash rent. I'm not going to outbid another farmer because I don't want my exposure level real high on high cash rents in case we have a disaster. What I try to sell myself on is that your land is an investment. It's an asset to you, and I want to take that asset and I want to make it better long term, so you can have steady, dependable income that will support you in your retirement, and income that you can count on. I want you to be able to trust me that I'm going to do the best thing for your land. I'm going to be extremely honest, extremely transparent with you, and let you know every step of the way what's going on your farm and how I'm trying to make your farm better. And by doing that, ultimately, I try to show them that I believe that they will make more money long-term by having me as a long-term tenant, taking care of their land, building it up, fertilizing it properly, having a proper rotation on it, rather than, say, bidding it out and having a farmer change every 3 years, and then because they bid high on the rent, the farmer's not able to really afford much in fertility, and the value of that landlord's land goes down because fertility and other things are not being managed properly because the farmer's paying too much in rent. So that's kind of how I try to sell myself when I get approached by a landowner or I find out that land has become available through somebody retiring. And ultimately, it's not going to lead to me being the biggest farmer around, which I don't want to be the biggest farmer around, but I do want to be the best farmer around, and I'm comfortable with the acres that we got. I can make a good living on it. I'd like to add a few more than what we've got, but ultimately, I know the Lord's going to take care of me. He's going to provide for me what I need. So I try to take advantage of every opportunity that comes along, but I'm not going to go out there and try to make opportunities for myself to the detriment of somebody else that's already working the ground. That's just my philosophy, and that's what I'm going to stick to. Well, anyway, guys, I guess that's going to wrap up this episode. Probably going to be the last episode until probably later on this winter after we run through our harvest videos. I believe the next thing you're going to be able to see is us getting old Big Red out and shelling some corn and starting to get starting the marathon of getting our fall crops out. But anyway, guys, I really appreciate y'all watching. Y'all have asked some awesome questions, and if you got any other questions about questions I've answered in the past, maybe clarify them a little bit, or stuff you've seen in the news, stuff you've seen in your area, stuff you've seen in other videos of ours, feel free to drop a question in the comments below, and I promise at some point I'll get to it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Check back with us. We'll be back again soon.